Trauma and the Soul by Donald Cowshed, the first of 5 books in this video, which saved my life and made me the man who I am today. And if you've never seen me before, 30-second disclaimer about who I am. This isn't a generic self-development channel. You won't find these books in airports or bookstores. I've spent around 13,000 to 14,000 hours reading 700 psychology books and rereading about 160 of them over the last 5 years, and this is where I talk about trauma healing, jungian psychology, transpersonal psychology. You can check out the channel if you're interested. There's no editing. I'm not going to entertain you. I'm sharing the 5 books that made me. And interestingly, these are the 5 books that I did a little thought experiment.
You know, this is cool. I mean, someone who read so many psychology books, which is amazing, philosophy books, and he's going to give us his top 5. This is going to be very interesting for us nerds who are into this type of thing.
I wonder what would happen if I was cursed and had to forget everything I've read. Which books would I choose that go deep, go wide, and represent the full spectrum of multi-stage self-integration that goes into my personal wounds and also reaches towards my personal ambitions and self-actualizing energy, let's call it. These are the 5 books I've chosen. They're rare. You may not have seen them before, apart from one, which is actually the second one. You've probably seen this one before. That's a great read.
What was that?
They're rare. You may not. Energy, let's call it. These are the 5 books I've chosen. They're rare. You may not have seen them before, apart from one, which is actually the second one. You've probably seen this one before.
The Warrior Magician Lover. Nope, never heard of it. Have you guys heard of it?
That's a great read for men. I've got an alternative for women later on. Let's just go into the books. These are the books that made me. We'll start with Trauma and the Soul by Donald Cowshed.
Trauma in the Soul. There it is. Beautiful.
This book is so well received by clients and students. They say it's one of the most important psychology books they've ever read, and for very good reason. It's a Jungian take on dissociation and the psycho-biological process of fragmenting and splitting your identity when you've gone through pain.
Damn.
It could be a difficult childhood. It could be a horrific moment in your adult life. And for me, this is the book that restored my will to live after I lost it at the age of 10 and spent 12 years not really having it. When I was 10, I went upstairs after school one day, suddenly collapsed into a existential ball of dread at the top of the stairs, and spent about 2 or 3 days in a row asking my parents questions about, is God real? What's the point of living? I don't see any reason for all this. And then began the emo stage and classic teenage rebellion, but it wasn't a superficial thing for me. My parents didn't have the answers. It's no fault of theirs. I just didn't really exist in my body, and I didn't see a reason for living at all. By reading Trauma and the Soul, I got the answers that I was looking for.
That's really crazy at 10 years old to be in such a pit. I don't know, just his background on how many books he's read, it really makes me want to pick up these 5 books and do the work.
I read the case studies of early childhood developmental issues. I read the stories and the therapeutic process of how to get yourself back into the body. And very interestingly, and most importantly of all, this idea that the soul has a built-in protective mechanism so that when the body is suffering lacerations and wounding, there's a special and eternal part of you which temporarily leaves to keep it safe. It's a thought experiment. It may not be the literal truth, but psychologically, if you suffer from dissociation or depersonalization, you might already get what I'm talking about. This is the book that you need to read if you want to get back into your body after something very bad happened in your past. Without a doubt, this is one of my top 5 personal books, one of the books that made me, because it gave me back the will to live.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Many of us suffer from meaninglessness, purposelessness, and that's why a large part of us are half alive. And anyone who's gone through the wounding, the trauma of life, which I tend to think that we all have in our own ways, and we're carrying this stuff that splits us or fragments us, like he says, I think this is going to be a tremendously great read. Let me know if you're inspired to read this same book as I am after his review. I'm looking forward to it.
In a very raw way, and it's a very academic book. It's not an accessible book, but it's a truly impactful book. Let's move on to the second one. I already previewed it. It's King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore.
Rediscovering the archetypes of the mature masculine. Interesting. a bold map for traversing the masculine psyche. Cool. This book looks right up my lane. Right up my lane. Thank you so much for sharing this. Make sure you guys give this guy a follow. It's Jordan Thornton. Make sure you like his video. I'll leave the original video below, so that way you can check out his content and support this guy.
And how am I forgetting? Douglas Gillette. Awful. I've recommended this book so many times. You can see it's all crumpled up and full of highlights. I've taught it. Robert Moore, Douglas Gillette, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. You've probably seen this book before. For my female viewers, which is about half of my audience, these are the alternatives I want you to go for. If you're not a man, then read something like Goddesses and Every Woman by Jean Shinoda Bolen, or the more recent equivalent of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. This one here, Sage, Huntress, Lover, Queen by Mara Branscombe. This came out in 2023, and I read about 5 or 6 different feminine psychology, feminine archetype books. That entire shelf over here is all masculine, feminine psychology. This is the best one that goes the deepest and the widest in a way that's also practical in regards to shadow work. This is the equivalent of this book, but I'm going to talk about the books that made me. The reason I choose this one, if I had...
I didn't realize I was covering that book up again, guys.
...to forget everything that I've learned, books that made me. The reason...
There it is.
I choose this one, if I had to forget everything that I've learned, is that as a man, I need to understand the essence of masculinity. Traditionally speaking, archetypally speaking, the healthy and unhealthy versions of the king, warrior, magician, and lover energy. This book helped me to understand my issues with addiction, my issues with ambition, my issues with rage and guilt and sorrow, and what it would mean to be a healthy king, or at least enter into princehood, intentional princehood, have a small community that I look after, what it means to give blessings, what it means to be generative, what it means to protect your people, and what it means to be a source of light and a light vessel that then amplifies out into the world in an unselfish and genuinely giving way. If you're a man who hasn't read this book...
Sounds like a great book. Another one that I'm definitely picking up. What about you guys?
I'm not sure what you're doing this deep on self-development psychology YouTube, because you probably should have read it. And if you're a woman, please read this book. And if you're anyone, read both of them together, because then you'll understand the other half of humanity, and it'll improve your relationships with family, friends, and romantic partners, or maybe even your children. King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. It's been said many times by many people why this book's great. I recommend you read it for yourself. And the next one, the third book that made me... No surprises for long-time viewers on the channel. You can guess what it's going to be. It's about somatic therapy, and in particular, it's about bioenergetics. It's Alexander Lowen and The Voice of the Body. This is a collection of lectures and essays between 1960 and 1980, give or take. Lowen is a master of working with the feelings and working with the self. Interesting side note, this book for me was my entry point into Alexander Lowen in terms of the formal reading. I've got all 12 of his books over there, and again you can see the pattern. There's a variety of archetypal psychology. I'll choose just one. There's a variety of Alexander Lowen and bioenergetics. This is all trauma. This is the one that captures the breadth and the depth. You'll learn about rage, you'll learn about things like intimate expression and disorders of intimacy. You'll also learn more about what it means to live in an emotionally intelligent way with your mind and body in harmony. This book changed the way that I understood embodiment at a fundamental level, starting with Trauma in the Soul by Donald Cowshed. I don't think I've read them in this order. I think I read this one first, then Trauma in the Soul. I understood why I left my body, or why I got caught into things like screen addiction in particular, and what it would mean and what the benefits would be of actually returning to my body and enjoying this beautiful thing called human life. Get into bioenergetics, learn how to cathartically release, get rid of all of that pent-up aggression, and also, to the men out there and myself, or maybe some of the women that are more emotionally repressed, learn how to cry in a way that feels strong. You don't need to weep every day of the week. You don't need to cry in front of your girlfriend or your wife. There's all this nonsense advice out there of being vulnerable for the sake of vulnerability. I want you to be courageous with your feelings, and I want you to be honest about what's going on. And you can do that privately. You can do that therapeutically with another male coach or a male therapeutic figure. You can do that with your close male friends. And if you're in a...
I think this is very good. I think as men, you are looked as a strong person. And a lot of your family derives their sense of safety and security with your strength. And so we all men get overwhelmed by the fury of life sometimes, the chaos of life. And sometimes we do need a reset in the body and the mind and the emotions. And crying is a natural release of energy that you need to get out of your body. But I do agree with this man to do it to know that it's strengthening you, it's recalibrating you, it's bringing you back to homeostasis. This is a ton of release. But I do agree with this man is to do it alone. You're never alone, right? We have the Almighty God, but do it alone in the privacy of yourself because it can be misinterpreted or misunderstood. And to me, I feel like you always want to showcase to who you protect that you are strong. And although we get overwhelmed, it's okay, but to always make sure that what you're going through in that moment doesn't scare your family or make their safety feel vulnerable. That's the gift of masculine frame and masculinity is this safety that people feel around you because you do handle yourself and conduct yourself in a way of calm and strength. But as strong men, you need an outlet, and I love how he said that to cry from strength. It's beautiful.
Truly safe and loving relationship, you can do it with your female partner. But there's a time and a place for emotions as a man, and a book like this will help you break out of polarized, unhealthy, unconscious repression, but not swing too far into
Bingo.
overt vulnerability. And
I feel like, man, these books are going to be so good for me. I feel like when we cascade into the emotional plane, we can get really lost in there, sometimes forever. Through our whole lives, we just are victims of our emotions. I believe strong masculinity keeps all of that down here, not repressed, but it's like we have a cauldron within and we alchemize these things in us. And that strength of knowing that we're above our emotions, that strong masculine frame within us can really docile that down to not let it take us. Does that make sense? And to stay in that strength that we're in control, not our emotions, not our feelings. Does that make sense?
this lopsided, almost shadow warrior, weakling king energy, you'll find your middle point. You'll be able to rage when it's appropriate and never hurt someone physically, never cast abuse and violence out there in a way which would be unjust and wrong. And you'll also know how to express difficult or negative emotions and weep in a way that many men don't for many years.
Listen, if you're struggling with always feeling anxious, depressed, confused, scared, trepidatious, these are the things that you need to plug into, these resources of information. I would say wisdom. I'm sure these books are filled with wisdom. A lot of us have, personally, I lacked a father in my life. I didn't have a strong male figure, minus my high school coaches. Thank God I had them, who whipped my ass into shape and became the best player I absolutely could be because they didn't let me be weak. A lot of us do come from single family environments where we didn't have a strong masculine presence. And so many of us are trapped as boys, not knowing how to handle the chaos of life around us and to surrender to it, but also protect ourselves from it. And that's why these books very, very much resonate with me. And I'm looking very interested. Maybe I'll read these and do book reviews on my reaction channel. That'd be kind of interesting, right? Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in.
In a row, and I likewise went through a period of multiple years in a row where I couldn't cry. For all my teenage years, my early 20s, I could not cry. Bioenergetics opened up my chest. I learned how to embody, how to stack my posture, how to align what some would say is my chakras or my energetic points, my meridians. It's all in that book. Embodiment. Currently, we've got the trauma and the soul idea of coming back down into the body. We've got the archetypes of masculinity, having a full spectrum psychological understanding, and then we've gone Alexander Lowen with the voice.
There's a lot of language he uses. Maybe it's from the books or from his own personal philosophy. I'm not really understanding all the terms and key phrases that he's making, but he has an internal strategy to not be victim to his circumstances or emotions, and that's all we can do as men. Is we are all given free will, and so we all can align ourselves in certain ways to embrace the volatility of life and the beauty of life, and not be a victim to our circumstances ever. There's true power in that. That everything that comes at us, we say yes, yes, yes.
Of the body, interestingly, another somatic twisting of all these different fragments and parts. Let's move on to what I believe to be probably the most cognitively challenging book of the stack. This is for people who appreciate consciousness studies and people who appreciate, well, let's just say, integral theory and integral philosophy, because no surprise, we need to have a book by Ken Wilber. We've got Ken Wilber's The Religion of Tomorrow. I'll turn it this way so that you can see it.
The Religion of Tomorrow. Interesting.
And I'm kind of cheating with this book, because
That's a big one.
I'm going to move out the way and let you see the library. This is just the biggest, most comprehensive Ken Wilber book that I have, that I feel is the most relevant to my personal issues around spiritual craving and existential searching. All of these books over here, there's about 10 of them that are Ken
Look at that bookshelf. Sexy. Incredible.
Wilber. That's my integral shelf. I've got Hegel in there and spiral dynamics and Aurobindo and a variety of different integral thinkers. This one does the trick. If you're not familiar with integral theory, start with A Brief History of Tomorrow by Ken Wilber. There's a shortcut for free. If you're already familiar with integral theory, pick up this 700, 800 page behemoth, because what you're going
I think I'm going to start with the first three. I think I'm going to read these in order, the way he recommended them. And then I'll figure out probably if I want to read this next book.
to learn is how to practically advance your consciousness along the spiral of self-development to get what Ken Wilber would call the integral state, which means that you're more or less aligned within your central identity from a psyche, soul, and material perspective. Religion of Tomorrow is particularly tilted towards religion, as it says in the book. So if you're someone who's raised in a certain religious background, or like me, you were raised without a religious background. I was raised in an atheistic family. I had to begin my search for God and my search for my own soul on my own terms, which has its benefits and drawbacks. You'll learn how any particular religion, any particular spiritual philosophy, when it's taken to its full expression, can be a pathway towards enlightenment. I'm not personally seeking enlightenment as my main goal in life, but Ken Wilber's incredibly academic, incredibly precise way of structuring out the different quadrants of the psyche, the different aspects of humanity, and in giving you the tools and intellectual food to digest. It's so wonderful. You need to read integral theory. If you've already seen things like David Hawkins and the levels of consciousness with the emotions from shame to enlightenment, that's kind of like the...
I think he's referring to Power versus Force, David Hawkins. It's a good book.
Elementary school version of the college version with Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber integrates, ironically, David Hawkins's work and many teachers for many different levels, but if there's 5 different books that I'd pick if I lost all of my memory, I'd go with the one that's the fattest big daddy of all the integral philosophy. I think this one's the best work. Stay with it. But also, you are going to want to go a bit deeper into Jungian therapy in particular, if you're somebody like myself, and I've struggled to try and pick one book. This is the one book that I really couldn't decide. Which single Jungian therapy book? Do I pick Carl Jung? No, definitely not. Inside my course, The Shadowwork Library, I even say openly, if you're trying to learn about Jungian psychology and Jungian philosophy, don't read Jung directly as your first entry point. I actually recommend this book, Jung's Map of the Soul by Douglas Murray. And Douglas right there, he is your guide. I'm not putting Carl Jung, Douglas Murray, and Douglas right there.
While scientists and astronauts have explored and mapped the physical universe, Carl Jung and the analytical psychologists who followed up his work have begun to chart the vast inner world of the human psyche. Earlier surveys of Jung's ideas have been difficult to follow or have lacked unity. Murray Stein gives us the whole formidable sweep of Jung's thoughts, presenting Jung as simultaneously a dedicated scientist, a creative artist, and a seer in the tradition of Eckhart and Blake. A guide for the beginner and for the serious student of Jung, as well as an excellent review of Jung's theories for the seasoned scholar. Jung's Map of the Soul is the most important book on Jung psychology to have come out in years. It is enlightening both for those who want to understand Jung and for those who think that they already do. That's awesome. I think this is a great book to start with. Thank you so much for the recommendation.
He is your guide. I'm not putting Carl Jung down. I'm just saying that in terms of an overview of the entire philosophy, this book goes into complexes, goes
That's
into the
awesome.
anima and animus.
What a great recommendation. You know, I mean, I've looked up Jung. I watch a lot of his videos on YouTube, and I think I own one of his books that I have not opened yet. But this seems a little bit more beneficial to get the groundwork of his thesis.
It goes into archetypes, it goes into a variety of wounds around creative imagination or around existential longing. A lot of existential books in this particular stack. You can tell when their wounds are. Jung's Map of the Soul is the number one summary
Good for you, man.
of Jungian psychology. And if I had to pick just one book, I'd pick this one because it does a good job at being simple but not superficial.
Maybe this is the good one to start with then.
I've recommended this book to clients, and I've seen people grasp the idea of the father complex and the mother complex, understand their primary wounds in relation to their family of origin story, and understand their romantic projections towards the unavailable anima or animus who haunts their dreams. This book unlocks the perspectives, and of course, if I could choose 10 more books to share with you, I would. We're just choosing one. Jung's Map of the Soul, please go for it. These are the 5 books I would save, but of course, the 700 books. So I decided to give myself a bit of a gift. And what would I do if I had 3 more books? So 3 bonus books hidden away at the...
Guys, I think we're going to stop there. Those are amazing recommendations. Make sure to give him a subscribe and a like. Truly a guy who, I mean, this is the type of guy that I would want to ask this question to, and he put this out there. So appreciate you doing it, dude. Thank you so much to you guys for taking the time to watch this with me. I really hope that each of you who did watch this, if it's 50 people or 5,000 people, that you pick up one of these books and you commit to reading it. And you come back to this video and you go, what? How did this change? Thank you. Thank you for letting this one video redefine so much in me. I think that'd be really cool. That's what this channel is supposed to do. I mean, I'll react to some mindless entertainment too. But anyway, don't want to ramble too long. Just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to watch this with me. And I will definitely catch you guys on the next one.